Censoring things like speech and art have been around since one group of people got any kind of power over another group. A 2021 survey of Gen Z revealed that almost 20% of them have attempted to or have canceled someone. But while the term cancel culture started with Gen Z, terms like character assassination, defamation, slander, libel, gossip, smear campaigns, it's all been used to harm or cancel people. Moral panics can be fueled by social anxieties, political opportunism, and media sensationalism, serving to distract from other issues or consolidate power. And if you are on the receiving end of the mob, it can cost you your job or even worse. The horror genre has always been an easy target, even reaching to comic books in the 1950s, which is what I want to talk about, because how could something as innocuous as a comic be the topic of Senate subcommittees? I mean, these people had lived through the Depression, World War II, and the Korean War had just ended. The horror tradition in sequential art goes back to at least the 12th century to a Japanese scroll, which translated to the Scroll of Hungry Ghosts. Hungry ghosts are people-eating ghosts who are the spirits of greedy and selfish individuals who are cursed after death to seek out and eat human corpses. They do this at night, scavenging for newly dead bodies while lamenting their cravings for dead human flesh, which would have made a pretty cool comic. In the early 20th century, pulp magazines began putting out stories about crime, mystery, and horror, and these became real popular. After comic books became established by the late 30s, horror stories began appearing in superhero stories with vampires, creatures, and mad scientists that came from the success of Universal horror films out of the 30s. EC Comics was started by Maxwell Gaines in the 1940s. EC stood for Educational Comics, and it specialized in educational and child-oriented stories. After the owner died in '47, his son William took over the company and renamed it Entertaining Comics. It published different types of stories, but its horror titles like Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear is what got a lot of attention. The problem came in 1948 with the publication of two articles by Dr. Frederick Wertham, Horror in the Nursery and the Psychopathology of Comic Books. Wertham believed that they were a primary direct cause of juvenile delinquency, crime, and a moral decay in children. His focus was on protecting youth from perceived negative environmental influences, leading him to campaign against the graphic violence and sexual content found in crime and horror comics. Just before testifying to a Senate subcommittee hearings, Wertham published Seduction of the Innocent, arguing that comics taught children to be criminals. He stated, "I think Hitler was a beginner compared to the comic book industry." So over-the-top Hitler analogies have been going on since at least then. Wertham told the senators, "It is my opinion without any reasonable doubt and without any reservation that comic books are a contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency. The child most likely to be influenced by comics," he said, "is the normal child. Morbid children are less affected because they are wrapped up in their own fantasies." He also wrote that Batman comics were homoerotic, Wonder Woman was about sadomasochism, and Superman comics arose in children fantasies of sadistic joy in seeing other people punished over and over again. I've read comic books my whole life and still do, and I'm not sure about the homoerotic or sadomasochism thing, but I am not a doctor. Some of these publishers were called to testify before this committee. In one confrontation, when questioned about a cover showing a severed head, Williams Gaines argued it was in good taste for a horror comic. Although the committee's final report did not blame comics for crime, the public backlash and pressure from the hearings forced the industry to adopt the Comics Code Authority in 1954. It enabled comic publishers to self-regulate the content of comic books. It was voluntary, but some advertisers and retailers looked to it for reassurance, and this led to the decline of horror comics. A publisher named Farrell's published titles like Fantastic Fears, Haunted Thrills, Strange Fantasy, and Voodoo, All 4 titles fell victim to the Senate subcommittee and were canceled by the end of 1954. Gaines waged several battles with the Comics Code to keep his EC brand free from censorship, but pressures prompted him to stop publishing all of his comics and concentrate on his humor magazine named Mad, which became his company's greatest success. By the early 2000s, publishers began bypassing the Comics Code. The code rejected an issue of the Marvel Comics series X-Force, requiring changes to be made in 2001. Instead, Marvel stopped submitting to them and established its own rating system. In 2011, the remaining publishers stopped using it, finally rendering the code defunct. But censorship, canceling businesses and people, plus a never-ending display of pointless congressional hearings to tell us who to blame society's problems on, are still alive and well today. The term rage bait has been identified as a dominant, defining feature of the online culture, with Oxford University Press naming it the word of the year for 2025. But if you're not interested in participating in any of the current outrages and have a little free time on your hands, you can find some of these comics I mentioned online in the public domain. They're a pretty fun read. Good night.